to an edition of Rewatch Rewind, where I talk about media that has saved many schools for many seasons. Right after I give this disclaimer, we're going to break down the film and touch on a few things like some events that occurred when this film was released to background about the film. I'll include some updates about the cast, and later we will go over some real-life observations that can be taken away from the film. Today we are rewinding to 1989 to revisit Lean on Me. It stars Morgan Freeman, Beverly Todd, Robert Guillaume, and Robin Bartlett. Disclaimer here. Feel free to fact check me and add more information in the comment section. I'm only one person, so I could have missed something or got it wrong, but I am open to others' knowledge. My sources and other links will be in the description box for further information. Okay, so let's get into the synopsis. Lean on Me is not to be confused with Stand By Me. That is a separate film for another day. For some reason, I always have to think about each of those movies to get the title right. Like, I always mix them up for some reason. According to IMDb, Lean on Me is about the dedicated but tyrannical Joe Clark. He is appointed the principal of a decaying inner city school and is determined to improve it by any means. So in a previous Rewatch Rewind, I mentioned that Hollywood rarely gets it right when it comes to accurately telling a real story. But according to the real Joel Clark, on whom this movie is based, he believed that this movie was 95% accurate. From researching for this rewind, there were definitely a few liberties taken, but the overall concept was captured correctly. So what do I remember about this movie from my childhood? I remember Joe Clark played no games. He definitely took extremes to get the school in check. He had an uphill battle from day one, so putting the chains on the door was necessary, from what I could recall. On my rewatch, Joe, who was played by Morgan Freeman, was really getting on my nerves. It was like he would soften up for a millisecond. And when I say a millisecond, I mean like that short. Then he would go right back to yelling. It's like, I think I'm mostly used to movies where the person starts off super abrasive, but by the end of the movie, there is a noticeable difference. Like, they've softened up to some degree, but not good old Joe Clark. I also remember not liking Miss Barrett. As soon as I saw her face on the screen, the dislike was immediately there. Honestly, that just shows that Lynn Thigpen played her part well. I understood what the character was trying to do when it came to advocating for the children who got kicked out of the school, but honestly, she was just doing a lot for me. I mean, it was like she just wanted to be against Joe Clark so badly. Miss Barrett's character was a great antagonist, but someone who could go toe-to-toe with Joe Clark was the music teacher, Mrs. Elliott, who was played by Robin Bartlett's character. This is like one of my favorite scenes because, she's up here trying to do her job. She's being the music teacher, preparing the students for their performance. And then here comes Joe Clark demanding some of her attention. And if you look at the scene, she does acknowledge him. I mean, granted, it's quick, but she does acknowledge that he requested that the students learn the school song. But then she gets right back to what she was doing. For whatever reason, this upsets Joe, and he asks to speak with her outside of the music room. They exchange a few words. It definitely gets heated. But guess who gets the last word? Mrs. Elliott. There was definitely a lot of heated moments in this movie, and although they were all great, I did like the fake graduation at the end of the movie when the credits are rolling. I thought that had like a nice little touch to it. So I didn't just enjoy seeing Joe argue with other people, okay? Just so you know. So let's transition to the year 1989 when this movie was released. We'll start off with trivia. Who is recorded as being the first Black state-elected governor in the U.S.? Choices are Lawrence Douglas Wilder, P.B.S. Pinchback, Wes Moore, and Oscar James Dunn. The answer will be at the end of this video. Okay, so continuing to discuss Black history, Frederick Drew Gregory is recorded as the first Black person to command a space shuttle by leading the Discovery. In 1991, he would also go on to command the Atlantis. This was also the year that a WWE spokesman admitted that WWE is a performance. As my brother says, WWE is not fake, but it is scripted. Some of the stunts are real, okay, so it's not a complete sham. So there is some, reality to it. We also have in August of this year, the original Nintendo Game Boy was released. The Arsenio Hall Show and Family Matters debuted this year. A few songs that were released this year include Miss You Much by Janet Jackson, Giving You the Best That I Got by Anita Baker, Love Shack by B-52s, which is one of my favorite songs, like it's in my favorites on my playlist, and Listen to Your Heart by Roxette, which always reminds me of when I worked at the beauty supply store, because this song, along with like some of the other oldies, were always in a never-ending rotation. Like, out of all the music that they had out there, they just continued to play the same songs. Switching tones, I had to include that this is the year that the Exonerated Five, formerly known as the Central Park Five, were being prosecuted. I was very close to watching When They See Us on Netflix when researching for this video, but the injustice makes me too mad. I mean, it just really doesn't make any sense. If you haven't watched the miniseries or you just don't know who the Exonerated Five are, here is a quick rundown. Kevin Richardson, 14, Raymond Santana, 14, Antron McCray, 15, Yusef Salam, 15, and 16-year-old Corey Wise were charged with almost ending the life of Trisha Miley, in addition to other serious charges. The young men were targeted and intimidated by the police, which caused them to be convicted with their coerced confessions. They served most of their sentence until the real offender confessed to the crime. So I just had to include that in there because, that was a moment in history that, kind of everyone was paying attention to just because of what came out, what was printed out in the media about them, spoken on TV about them. It was a case that, pretty much a lot of people were familiar with. But we're going to switch tones and get back to the movie. So Universal Studios initially took an interest in Joe Clark's notorious principal style around 1981. Although they purchased the rights to this story, they never took any action to start filming. After viewing an NBC segment about Joe Clark, Norman Twain became interested in bringing the story of Joe Clark to life. He moved quickly in his pursuit around 1986 by setting up a call with Joe the next day and flying out to meet him the very next day. After that, Joe Clark was all on board with the idea, although he was a little hesitant just because of what happened, with Universal Studios, but he was on board for the idea. Those behind the film had a vision of who they wanted in the role, and that was Sidney Poitier. Just as the film portrays, Joe Clark did change the doors of the school. He walked around school halls with a bullhorn and a bat. And this is what caused his story to be sensationalized in America. But not everyone agreed with this, including Sidney. So he wasn't interested in taking this role. Morgan Freeman wasn't even a second choice to play Joe Clark because this would have been his third film at the time. It's the typical employer not interested in giving the newbie a chance. But Morgan Freeman was eventually cast for the role, and shooting started at the real East Side High. Morgan Freeman had access to Joe Clark regularly due to the set being on his high school. So Morgan actually has an interesting experience with this. Quote, I had a producer, director, and writer there, all with their own very clear ideas about who this man was, when the actual man was right there. I remember having to fight them back. We shot in his school, so I had him to draw on. Let's watch a quick clip of Morgan discussing more background about this film.
Did you spend a lot of time with Joe Clark?
Yes, every day.
Was he on the set?
Yes, he was there. The set was the school. School was in session. He was there, walking the halls, talking on his bullhorn. I would go down to his office when I could catch him, or somewhere run into him in the halls. When we first started, I would seek him out every day and just walk with him for a while. Say good morning, and accompany him on his rounds. He doesn't stay in his office. He's in the halls. He's always in the halls.
Did he ever object to anything that was in the film and said, no, that's not the way it is, that's not the way it was?
No, he didn't. He didn't object to anything. He explained that some things were different, but he understands that we were dramatizing. We're not doing a documentary.
What and where was license taken, Morgan? In other words, where did the fact leave off and the fiction begin?
Joe's married.
And beyond that?
Well, beyond that, nothing matters. He's a married man. He has, I think, 3 or 4 children. I know he has a son, he has 2 daughters. And we didn't mention any of that.
No, as a matter of fact, there's a line that says your wife left you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She didn't.
As we all know, Morgan Freeman went on to become a household name, but I want to make note that he has won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor as Eddie Scrap or Iron Dupree in Million Dollar Baby, and for his performance in Driving Miss Daisy, he won a Golden Globe for Best Actor. He has also had a few nominations for other roles. Let's talk about the career of some of the other cast members. Lean on Me was Karina Malina White's first role. She got cast pretending to be a 16-year-old while she was actually around 24 years old. Technically, she was a student, which the casting director was interested in, just not a high school student.
I heard about from a friend who also went to Howard. He had an agent at the time. I didn't have an agent. And he heard about this audition, but they wanted real kids. They didn't want actors. And so I stood out online with a cattle call and pretended I wasn't an actor and pretended I was a 16-year-old girl. I had a roommate at Howard who was from New York. She was from Jamaica, Queens, so I knew all her background, and I just pretended I was her. I was like, yeah, I'm from South Ozone Park, I went to Hillcrest High, and I'm 16, and I just lied my way into the audition. And I booked it, and then the ish hit the fan when they said, okay, well, we're gonna start shooting before school ends, and so we gotta contact your principal and get your work, and then I had to, fess up.
So ultimately, the film, would become one of those iconic films that people always reference. Mm-hmm. Your performance in there was something that stood out, I think, immediately in terms of the empathy that we were able to see from the character. Mm-hmm. What did you do to tap into that? Was it still like your friend, or did you just like pull it from a different place, particularly like the crying and the empathy that we've seen on camera?
Right. I think I've always enjoyed being able to make people laugh and make people cry, so I enjoy comedy and drama equally. And during the movie, my oldest nephew, who was 6 at the time, living in Philadelphia. We were shooting in Paterson, New Jersey, and he was shot by some drug dealers on the street, and I was able to use the pain of that. He became a paraplegic, like so many of our brothers, and so the pain and the turmoil that my sister was going through, as well as his sister, who was only a few years older than him at the time. So that was a family tragedy that I was in the midst of. It was happening while we were shooting. So you pull from life. You pull from your life always.
Karen gained more popularity after being cast as Charmaine Brown in The Cosby Show, and she went on to play in A Different World around the early 90s. Then after that, she played Nicolette Vandross in Malcolm and Eddie for the entirety of the 4-season show. Of course, I can't forget her iconic voice acting role as Dejanay Jones in The Proud Family. I remember her in The Cosby Show just because she was that fast talker friend. But I grew up on her for her being in The Proud Family. So outside of this movie, that's where my mind goes to when I think about her. Karen was able to eat off this role again when The Proud Family was rebooted in 2022. Throughout the years, she has always done theater work where she's allowed to act in different roles that Hollywood typically doesn't cast her in. From right to left, you have Kenny Kelly, Michael Best, Dwayne Jones, Stephen Capers, and Anthony Fuller. These are the members of Riff, an R&B doo-wop group previously known as Playboys. They were students of Eastside High who were featured in the film, which helped them gain some fame. They put out 2 albums as a group. Some of their hits include My Heart Is Failing Me, If You're Serious, and Baby It's Yours. From there, Anthony, Dwayne, and Michael went on to join Men of Vision. They only put out 1 album under this group in 1999. Kenny Kelly passed away in 2016 with the cause of death being excluded from online sources as there wasn't much coverage about his death at the time that he passed away. The most current lineup of the group includes Michael Best, Anthony Fuller, Stephen Capers, and possibly Delvis Damon, Andre Lamar, or Kenny Wilkins. Their last recorded songs on their YouTube page are Christmas songs, but they are still performing today with their notable harmonies. Lean on Me was also Jermaine Hopkins' first role. His stepfather noticed an open call in the paper for kids to be in the film. Jermaine credits him getting the role due to being able to show a writer that he was Sam's. He was able to cry in the audition, and it was authentic. Once he got the role, he spent a lot of time with Morgan Freeman to help prepare to be Sam's and would often eat lunch with him in his trailer. A few years later, Jermaine was cast as Steele in the movie Juice. He was able to work pretty consistently in the 90s, but once the 2000s rolled around, roles started to dry up for him. As a way to feed himself, he started to learn about the cannabis industry before it was officially the cannabis industry. He got arrested in 2011 and 2017 for marijuana-related charges. Jermaine is a father and a husband. He appears to be a member of the Carolina Kings Motorcycle Club. More recently, he has been a part of some movies that you can check out on Tubi with a project called Sebastian coming out in 2023. If you don't already know, Tubi is a free app, so on a random weekend, look up Equal Standard, Asbury Park, or Sebastian. In the 34 years since this movie was released, several individuals have passed away, including Robert Guillaume, Alan North, Lynn Thigpen, Sloan Shelton, Kenny Kelly, and Michael Moran. Lean on Me is still a solid film that is iconic for a reason. The film feels like it has nowhere to go when Joe Clark is arrested, but when the students rally outside of the jail for their principal, then viewers get the spirit of the movie in that last scene. There may be some dated things in the film, but the storytelling still holds up, and I would rate this movie 4 out of 5 ice creams. Despite being somewhat dated, this film is kind of futuristic in that Joe Clark's style may be relevant for the 21st century, so let's talk about it. Joe Clark became known across America because of his extreme tactics in the education system. His practices came off more as disciplinary to those that did not agree, so there was plenty of controversy seeing his story on a big screen. One conversation that I saw on Reddit asked the question, is it practical to expel kids who also need a chance? I saw a Redditor who complained that the district had to put those who were expelled from the school somewhere, so they did go to other schools, and obviously there was issues with them at other schools, and a lot of people had problems that Joe Clark expelled them to begin with. So then we have to ask the question, who is more important to save? Students who make good grades or the trouble kids? But I think that's the wrong question to ask. I know that Joe Clark, he kind of answered in his own way. He said, the kids that are more important to save are the ones who are getting good grades, who are showing up, who want to be here. But I think there has to be a balance in discipline and leniency. From what I've heard from some teachers in various states, there is a lack of punishment in schools. So there's too much leniency, and you see the students misbehave because there aren't any consequences, or they're so minuscule compared to the misconduct that it really doesn't have an impact on people. So really quickly, I'm going to play a clip of, some of the issues that I've seen in the school system in our nation.
It's a brutal back-to-school season across the country, spread all over social media. Police officers injured, students arrested at this high school in Florida. A 13-year-old arrested for allegedly attacking a student with autism in California.
There's no doubt that there's been more fighting and more violence in schools.
Absolutely. This is across the board. Our members everywhere are talking about the challenges.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Back in September, Jacob Cantu was in a bathroom stall at one of Connecticut's largest high schools when someone tossed a trash can over, hitting him in the head. How do you feel about going to school?
Honestly, it's still a bit worrying at times.
The vandalism and violence so bad, the superintendent closed the school and ordered a day of remote learning.
So that's definitely crazy. A lot going on. I mean, when I was in school, of course there were fights, but it didn't take away from being in the school setting. If there was an issue with a student in class, you never had, well, at least for me, I never experienced the student like bucking up so much to the teacher that, they want to put their hands on them or, saying some disrespectful and foul stuff. It wasn't, to that extreme. But I do want to talk about when I was in elementary school, I forged a parent's signature for my friend. I got caught and went straight to in-school suspension. I felt so bad once my mom found out, and I never got in trouble again after that. The end. Just kidding. Was I a perfect student after that incident? No. But I think I got as close to perfect as I could while also being an adolescent. I had times when I tuned out in class, disrespected a teacher or two, like not paying attention when they're talking or maybe laughing when they're trying to get a straight answer from me. And I skipped class a couple times, but overall my mind was on my academics and my future. And I wanted to bring this experience up because school is such a foundational time. This is where you learn to respect authority. This is where you learn to interact with peers and other people in society. It just instills a lot of important foundational things in you as a individual. So taking away discipline in school is not a reflection of real life. In real life, for most people, when someone chooses to break a serious rule at work, they are fired or they are arrested. There are consequences. I don't say that without understanding the importance of leniency. It can't all be discipline, but when I go to a large college graduation and there are only 5 people graduating with a degree in education, the field is seen as being in serious trouble. People know what's going on at school, even if you're not in the field, you're not a teacher, but you hear about different things. Of obviously, the thing that's been an issue for years is the pay. And if you're having issues with students, putting hands on teachers, that's a big problem. And then on top of that, you have to worry about school violence, people coming in and harming kids and harming teachers. It's just too much to deal with it's too much risk for the field. And I think there has to be something that has to be done, but who knows what will be done about it. Okay. I want to read quotes from Deborah and Thomas McIntyre, who were students of Joe Clark. I was one of the good kids, one of Mr. Clark's favorites. When Mr. Clark was there, I felt safe, so I did go to school. I did all that I could. And then when I felt like I was not going to go on the right path, before I could even get off, Mr. Clark put me back on the right track. Thomas stated, he kicked me out and he said, you can always come back to me and talk to me. You have the ability. You're gifted. And although at a young age, I was very upset at him for kicking me out, later on, I realized that, wow, don't let the excuses pull you down. You don't have a dad. That's fine. And that's what made him like a father figure. Maybe all of his students didn't feel this way, but Thomas and Deborah appreciated what Joe Clark did as a principal. He was tough, but he was able to make a difference in the lives of his students, even the ones that he had to discipline. If you enjoyed this Rewatch Rewind with me, the one and only Rina, then like this video and subscribe. I already know that y'all are going to leave the most iconic lines down below, but make sure to leave any information that was left out about this movie in the comments section as well.
You better know it, because this time, if you don't get it right, you're suspended for 10 days each. Now, is that clear? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
All right, then. The school song. Let me hear it.
All right, fellas. Let them hear it.
Very side, by that side will stand and always praise thy name. Praise thy name, praise thy name. To ever